So I want to show you guys a little trick that I came up with that I thought would be kind of interesting to try out on the vintage RC10s. As you can see, I have a front wing here mounted on the shock tower. Now, I actually posted a picture of this on Facebook about a week or two ago, and I got a lot of likes, but then I also got a fair amount of criticism for it. The idea being that it might not do much, or because of the position of the wing, it could actually end up blocking airflow to the rear wing, and that's totally possible. But it's just something I wanted to play with to see, conceptually if it could work. I have not track tested it yet, but I want to show you at least how to mount one of these on an old RC10 if you happen to be interested in trying this out. So this is my RC10 with the RPM Worlds conversion. So the front and rear suspension is an RPM suspension. That means this shock tower here is an original RPM Worlds front tower. So it's a different tower than what you would have on the RC10 Worlds car or the team car or the Nix 91. Okay, but I have the Nix 91 right there and my team car right there, which is basically a Worlds car. And I'll show you how to do this. So at least on this type of a setup, if you have the RPM Worlds front end with the RPM Worlds tower, what I found is you have to mount this wing behind the shocks. You can't do it in front of the shocks. There's just not enough clearance for the plastic. And by the way, the part that I'm using here is a J-Concepts B5M front wing for the gull wing arm. They also make one for the flat arms for the B5, and the holes for that particular wing are closer together. And these older RC10 towers are kind of wide for the shock mounting holes. So chances are for every scenario you'll need the gull wing arm front wing if you want to do this, just so you have a little bit more sort of plastic from end to end to work with to mount the holes. Okay, so as you can see here, this particular front wing I have, because I'm running big bore shocks here, I have 2 nuts, 440 nuts, and then right in front of that I have the wing. Sorry, it's not really focusing. And then right after that, I go straight to the shock bushing and then the lock nut. Okay. Now, as far as the holes are concerned, I had to, I couldn't use any of the, stock dimples here because these are designed specifically for the B5M tower. But if you ream a hole between the first and second holes here on either side, that gets you pretty well aligned to the outer holes for the front tower. So maybe it's a little hard to see here. There are 2 holes for this shock tower. I'm using the outer hole, okay, right there. And if you want to mount on that outer hole for the shocks, you need to go between the first and second holes on the inside for the wing. So that basically means if you wanted to use the inner holes on the tower, maybe there's not quite enough room there to actually mount the wing behind the shocks. You may have to separately mount the wing on the outside holes and then mount the shocks on the inside holes if you want to do that. In any case, I plan on testing this out tomorrow at my local track. It's not a particularly high-speed track, so I can't really say how it's going to go, but I just want to play around with it and see how it works. So if you happen to have just a conventional RC10, which is probably the case for most of you guys. Okay, so actually, let me just take this, put the side here. All right, and let's put this on the stand. So the front tower for the RC10 team car or Worlds car is a wider tower. The holes are much farther apart at the top of the shock tower, and so you may not have as many options here for mounting this wing. So if you look at it here, I suppose if you go to something close to the outside holes here, okay, there could be, see if I line it up with, say, the top hole there. Yeah, there's enough plastic. So probably between, I think, the middle and outside hole on either side, you should be able to mount the front wing on the inside hole on the front tower. Okay, now this is an RC Carbon Works front tower that has 2 heights for the mounting holes. And that's because it's designed to be able to accommodate both the vintage shocks and I think the B4.1 shocks, which have a different length, and they have different holes on the tower to account for that. But you can also use that to your advantage for actually setting the wing position, right? So if I want to have the wing high or low, depending on how I want the air to flow over the rear wing, I can, perhaps move this wing up or down on the shock tower here. So maybe I'll play with that on this car. I haven't yet found that I really need, a front wing on this Worlds or this team car here, because with a shorty pack, if I just push the battery forward, I actually get plenty of rotation, at least in low speed corners. Probably in high speed corners, maybe, it'll push a little bit. So, but again, I haven't really found a scenario where I feel like I need a front wing on this, or for that matter, on my RPM Worlds RC10. That's a great, great car. But again, if you want to play around with it, your tracks are obviously different from the tracks that I run on. It's worth a try just to see what it's like. So it shouldn't be too much of a stretch to get the gull wing, front wing from J Concepts to work on an RC10 Worlds car, like a re-released, front shock tower, or if you want to get the RC Carbon Works unit, you just go to the website and you can just look through their menu of parts, and they have one that has 2 sets of holes, one at the high end, one at the low end, just to play around with the wing position. So that's an option. Now, I have talked in some detail about the Nix 91. I have a few running videos of this, and I've commented on how the front end is so light, it's very difficult to get the car to actually corner. And I've, played some games with, leaning the shocks down a bit to get the car to roll more, putting some weight under the belt crank to move some weight up front, running, stiffer rear springs, moving the rear hub carriers backwards to move weight forwards, mounting the battery as far forwards as possible. Like everything I can think of to just push weight forwards. But the front is still so light, you just don't get that much cornering. It's a bit of a pain. So maybe a front wing would be probably most beneficial for a Nix 91 as opposed to, these other 2 gems over here. And sure enough, this wing for the gull wing, you have plenty of space here on the plastic for the mounting points on the wing to actually fit this over the tower. And because on the Nix 91, the shocks mount behind the shock tower, you can actually mount the wing itself on the front portion of the tower here, okay? Now the wing position, because the tower is rather tall, it might be rather high. And if the wing is too high, then yes, it will affect airflow moving over the rear wing. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? If the whole point is to move the center of pressure forward to the front of the car, and if you already have plenty of rear traction, you don't necessarily need the rear wing, then putting a front wing on, maybe specifically to disturb airflow over the rear wing, could be helpful. But at the very least, it should give you some front downforce, and it's worth a try. So, maybe one of these days I'll try this on the Nix 91. I'm kind of semi-shelving this car because of the 3D printed parts. It breaks so easily. The steering rack gets loose rather easily because, again, that's a 3D printed steering rack. So, it's not very high quality. But eventually I get around to replacing that, and, maybe I'll try this front wing on the Nix. But for now, I'm just going to try it on this RPM RC10 Worlds here tomorrow at my local track, hopefully, and we'll see how it works. So, again, I just wanted to share that with you. This is an option. You can take the B5M gull wing front wing and make it work on a vintage RC10. Whether it works on the track depends on the track you have. So, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.